I was 16 years old when my father decided my life was disposable. Not in a fit of rage, not during a screaming match. He said it calmly, almost kindly, as if he were explaining a simple fact of nature. He told me I was not built for success, that some people are meant to lead and others are meant to stay out of the way. In his eyes, I was the extra piece, the spare. He didn't even look at me when he said it. He just folded his newspaper and nodded toward the hallway, like the conversation was already over. My older sister, Monique, was the future, the pride of the family. I was just background noise that had gotten too loud. Growing up, I learned early where I stood. Monique had the bedroom with the best light, the new clothes, the applause for every mediocre achievement. I had hand-me-downs, side eyes, and lectures for breathing wrong. When she failed, it was stress. When I succeeded, it was luck. I spent years trying to earn something that was never meant for me, approval. Before we go on, please subscribe and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I really do read every comment. By 15, I was working evenings and weekends. By 16, I was exhausted. I kept my grades solid. I stayed out of trouble. I even helped Monique study when she started slipping, sitting beside her at the kitchen table while our parents praised her discipline and ignored my presence. My mother, Denise, called me lazy if I slept past sunrise. My father, Robert, said I lacked ambition when I told him I wanted to work with food one day, maybe open a business instead of following a traditional college path. Things finally collapsed the summer before my junior year. Monique came home late one night, drunk and panicked. She had wrecked her car after a party. I found her crying in the garage, blood on her forehead, begging me not to tell. I made the worst decision of my life out of misplaced loyalty. I told our parents I had taken the car without permission. I said I panicked. I thought maybe, finally, they would see something good in me. They didn't. My father pointed at the door and told me to pack my things. That night, I slept at a bus stop with $11 in my pocket. The next morning, I came back to grab my school bag. My clothes were stuffed into a trash bag on the porch. Taped to it was a note in my mother's handwriting telling me I was on my own and needed to learn something from this. No one checked on me, not once. That was the moment I stopped being a daughter and became a survivor. The silence that followed was worse than the night I spent on that bench. No calls, no texts, no questions. At church, my mother told people I had run away because I was rebellious. My father let that lie stand. Monique went on with her life like nothing had happened, posting smiling photos, talking about college plans, laughing with friends who never knew I existed. I learned quickly how invisible a person can become when their family decides to erase them. I finished high school by pure stubbornness. I showered in public restrooms, studied in libraries, and worked double shifts at a corner store that paid just enough to keep me fed. Some nights, when the manager looked the other way, I slept on flattened boxes in the storage room. I kept my backpack close and my expectations low. For years, I told myself not to think about them, not to imagine holidays, not to wonder if anyone missed me. But every birthday came and went in silence. Every winter felt longer without a single card or message. It was like I had died, except I was still breathing. Eventually, I enrolled in community college. I paid one class at a time. I studied business at night and worked during the day. I learned how to survive on library internet and determination. When I finally earned my associate degree, there was no applause, no proud parents, just me, holding a piece of paper that proved I hadn't disappeared. I moved a few towns away and started freelancing. I helped small businesses fix their online presence, taught myself marketing, branding, anything I could get my hands on. I built everything from scratch, slowly, quietly. And for the first time, I felt something unfamiliar. Freedom. Then one afternoon, everything cracked open again. My phone buzzed with a message from my mother. Just one line. She asked if that was my face on the billboard near the highway. I stared at the screen for a long time before answering. It was true. The local Chamber of Commerce had featured me after I helped several struggling shops rebuild during the pandemic. To me, it wasn't about recognition. It was proof. Proof that I was never the problem. 2 hours later, my father called. I didn't pick up. Then Monique, then cousins, aunts, people who had not spoken my name in years. Suddenly, everyone remembered me. Suddenly, they were proud. I didn't respond, because I knew what was coming. The next day, my mother left a voicemail. She said things were hard. Monique and her husband Darius were struggling. A baby was on the way. They just needed a place for a little while. She asked if I still had that spare room I used to talk about. I laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was predictable. They didn't reach out because they missed me. They reached out because they needed something. And this time, I wasn't going to disappear to make their lives easier. I didn't return the call. Not that day. Not the day after. I let the voicemail sit there, untouched, like a sealed envelope I already knew the contents of. Silence had been their weapon for years. Now it was mine. A few days later, my Aunt Rochelle messaged me on social media. She said it would mean so much to the family if I stepped up right now. That word again. Family. Used like a crowbar, like it could pry open doors that had been nailed shut years ago. I nearly laughed out loud. Where was that family when I was sleeping with my shoes on, afraid someone would steal my bag while I slept? I didn't block anyone. I didn't post vague quotes or lash out. I just kept living my life. Or at least, I tried to. One evening, I pulled onto my street after a client meeting and froze. Parked across from my house was a familiar silver sedan, the same model my parents used to drive. My chest tightened as I sat there with the engine running, counting my breaths, hoping I was wrong. I wasn't. My mother was sitting on my porch, holding a plastic container wrapped in a towel. Banana bread, probably. The universal symbol of forced forgiveness. She stood up the moment I stepped out of the car, smiling like this was a surprise visit between close friends. She said I looked good. Said she'd been meaning to come by. Her arms opened, already assuming I would step into them. I didn't. I asked her why she was there. My voice was calm, but my hands were shaking. She brushed it off, said she just wanted to see me, to talk, to reconnect. Like time was a wrinkle you could smooth out with a smile. I asked about Monique. Her expression shifted for half a second. That was all I needed. She told me Monique and Darius had lost their apartment. Rent had piled up. The baby was coming soon. My father thought it would make sense for all of them to stay with me for a few months. Just until things stabilized. I reminded her of the night they threw me out. The trash bag, the note, the way I begged them to listen and they told me to learn something from it. I asked her why my peace was now a resource they felt entitled to use. She said it had been complicated back then, that they did what they thought was right. I told her no. They did what was easiest. For a moment, something like shame crossed her face. Then it hardened into defensiveness. She said I had turned out fine, so maybe it hadn't been so bad after all. That was it. That was the line. I told her she wasn't coming inside, that there was no spare room, that she could tell my father and Monique exactly that. She called me selfish as I turned away. I smiled and told her I was done being useful to people who only remembered I existed when they needed something. Then I closed the door. She didn't knock again. That night, sleep didn't come easily. I lay awake, replaying everything, the nerve it took for her to show up unannounced, the way she smiled like the past had been erased. Guilt tried to creep in, quiet and familiar. That old voice that asked if maybe I was cruel now, if success had hardened me. Then I remembered the look on my mother's face years ago at the principal's office when Monique accused me of hitting her. How she cried for my sister without asking a single question. How she never once looked at me with belief. Just disappointment. The guilt faded. I didn't owe them forgiveness. I owed myself peace. But I wasn't finished. Not out of revenge, but because the truth deserved air. I wrote a message to the extended family. Cousins, aunts, uncles. People who had heard their version of the story for years. I told them everything. About the crash, the lie, the night I was thrown out, the years of silence, the visit with the banana bread. I attached a screenshot of a message Monique had sent me years earlier, bragging about how easy it was to get rid of me. My finger hovered over the screen before I hit send. Then I pressed it. The response came faster than I expected. Messages poured in, one after another, people asking if it was real, saying they had been told I ran away, that I was unstable, that I had chosen that life. Apologies followed, some sincere, some awkward, some clearly driven by discomfort more than empathy. I didn't mind. I hadn't written for sympathy. I wrote for the truth. Then a message came from the last person I expected, Darius. He said he was sorry, said he had no idea. Monique had told him I was violent, unpredictable, that my grandmother had taken me in after I attacked our mother. He said reading my message made him feel sick. He wrote again a few minutes later. He said he read the message out loud to Monique. She laughed at first. Then she got angry. Then she tried to grab his phone and delete it. That was when something snapped for him. Darius said he packed a bag that night. The baby deserved better. He said he needed space and clarity. I stared at the screen for a long time before replying. All I said was that he did the right thing. I thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong. 3 days later, I was leaving my favorite coffee shop when I heard my name. I turned and saw Monique standing there. She looked nothing like the sister I grew up with. Her hair was unkempt, her eyes hollow, her posture tense. She was wearing an old jacket from high school, like she was clinging to the last version of herself that ever mattered. She stepped closer, too close. Her voice was sharp, defensive, already looking for a fight. She asked if I thought I was better than her now, if I really believed anyone cared about my story. She accused me of playing the victim, even now. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't match her energy. That seemed to bother her more. She laughed bitterly and admitted she had lied. She said it didn't matter because I survived. She gestured vaguely, mocking my house, the billboard, my life. She told me to stop crying and be grateful. There were 1,000 things I wanted to say. About the nights I went hungry, the birthdays spent alone, the way she enjoyed watching me be blamed for her messes. But she wanted a scene. She wanted chaos. So I gave her nothing. I stepped around her, opened my car door, and said the only thing that mattered. I told her she lied, and I thrived. Then I drove away and left her standing there. That night, I went to my grandmother's house. Evelyn was the only person who never needed proof. I told her everything, the messages, the confrontation, the way the past had finally caught up. She listened quietly, her hands folded in her lap, nodding now and then. When I finished, she reached for my hand and told me I had done good. That was all she said. That was all I needed. A week later, a certified letter arrived from my parents' lawyer. They were threatening legal action, accusing me of defamation. I laughed out loud. I hired my own attorney that afternoon. For the first time, I could afford one. My lawyer told me to relax. The claims were empty. The evidence alone would bury them. After that, they went quiet again. I framed the note they left me that night years ago. The one that told me I was on my own. I hung it in my office next to my award. Not as a wound, but as a reminder. Some people frame diplomas. I framed a warning and turned it into a promise. Being called a spare stays with you. It seeps into the quiet moments, the pauses between accomplishments, the seconds before you allow yourself to be proud. For a long time, I thought being labeled expendable meant I was weak, that I was replaceable. What I learned was the opposite. Spare parts don't break easily. They get repurposed, rebuilt, sharpened. That understanding settled into me slowly, like something finally clicking into place. I bought my house not long after that. I paid cash, $850,000, that represented every night I chose survival over bitterness. Every risk I took alone. Every door I built for myself when none were left open. The house wasn't about size or status. It was about quiet, about safety, about knowing no one could throw me out ever again. Life stabilized. My business grew. I hired staff. I mentored kids who reminded me of myself. Kids who had been told they were too much or not enough. I didn't talk about my family much. I didn't need to. Then, one evening, just after sunset, there was a knock at my door. Not a voicemail, not a message, a knock. When I opened it, I didn't see the man who raised me. I saw someone smaller, tired. My father stood there holding a thick envelope, his shoulders slumped, his voice unsteady. He said he was signing over his house to me. Said my grandmother believed I had earned it more than anyone. That was when I knew something was wrong. He told me Evelyn was sick. Stage 4 cancer. The words landed heavy and final. We sat on the porch in silence. The same porch where my mother had once asked for a room she never earned. He said my grandmother didn't want to distract me. Said she was proud of me. That word hurt more than anger ever could. I looked out at the garden she helped me plant. Lavender, rosemary, marigolds. She called it her living prayer. Her gloves still hung over the fence where she forgot them days earlier. This wasn't about them anymore. It was about her. Evelyn moved into my house not long after that conversation. Not because she couldn't care for herself yet, but because she wanted to be where I was. She said she liked the way the morning light filled the kitchen. She liked hearing me move around while she rested. She liked knowing she wasn't a secret. Those weeks were quiet in a way that felt sacred. We cooked simple meals together when she had the strength. She told me stories I had never heard, not just about the family, but about herself, about dreams she set aside, about mistakes she saw clearly in hindsight, about how hard it was to watch one child be lifted while another was erased. She never apologized for not saving me sooner. She didn't need to. She had never denied what happened. That alone made her different. As her health declined, I took on more. Appointments, medications, late nights sitting beside her bed, listening to her breathe. She wasn't afraid. She was practical, even gentle about it. One afternoon, she asked me to promise her something. She asked me to plant something new every spring. She said that was how you start over, not by erasing the past, but by growing forward anyway. She passed 3 weeks later, in my home, the one they said I didn't deserve. I held her hand until the end. She was calm. She was certain. She left this world the same way she lived in mine. Steady, honest, unafraid. In the days that followed, grief came in waves, some sharp, some quiet. I kept moving because she had taught me how. Then, while sorting through her things, I found a small wooden box tucked under her bed. It was sealed with a letter addressed to me in her careful handwriting. Inside were journals, pages yellowed with time, dates from when I was 9, 11, 14. Years I had tried to forget. She had written everything. The birthdays no one acknowledged. The bruises no one explained. The lies Monique staged. The names my mother used when she thought no one was listening. Proof. At the bottom of the box was a notarized deed transfer. Her house, signed, filed, made official long before she got sick. She had named me the sole heir. I didn't cry then. Not because it didn't hurt, but because her final act wasn't about grief. It was about justice. The funeral was small, exactly how Evelyn wanted it. No spectacle, no open invitation for people to perform grief they never earned. I chose the names carefully. Friends, neighbors, a few relatives who had shown up quietly over the years without questions or conditions. People who knew when to stand still in silence. Of course, my parents came anyway. They stood near the edge of the gathering, dressed in black like fabric could absolve history. My mother's eyes scanned the house, the garden, the people surrounding me. She didn't look sad. She looked unsettled, like someone realizing too late that the story they told for years no longer matched reality. Monique hovered beside them, stiff and hollow, avoiding my gaze. After the final prayer, my mother approached me. No tears, no apology, just a question she had clearly rehearsed. She asked if it was true. If Evelyn had left everything to me. I met her eyes and gave her something she had denied me my entire life. The truth. I said yes. That night, after the guests had gone and the house was quiet again, I found a letter on my doorstep. Typed, formal, cold. It wasn't a condolence letter. It was a request. They asked for temporary accommodation for healing and transition. They wanted to stay in the house. Evelyn's house. The same one they abandoned when she took me in. I sat on the steps for a long time with that letter in my hands. Then I went inside and wrote my response. I addressed it like a business inquiry. I thanked them for their interest in the residence. I explained that all rooms were currently occupied by peace, silence, dignity, and the long overdue scent of lavender. I said I could not accommodate guests who had abandoned those values in the past. I wished them well. I told them I hoped they would find shelter in the structures built by their own choices. I sent it without anger. The next morning, I posted my story online. Not for revenge, not for validation. Just truth. No edits, no apologies, no disguises. I told it plainly, the way Evelyn always believed it deserved to be told. I didn't expect what happened next. The response was overwhelming. Messages flooded in from strangers who had lived versions of my story in silence. People who had been labeled difficult, disposable, dramatic. People who had survived families that needed them invisible to function. They didn't message for gossip. They messaged for relief, because hearing the truth out loud made their own feel less heavy. Some thanked me. Some just said they felt seen. A few shared details they had never told anyone. I read every message slowly, carefully, like each one was a hand reaching out in the dark. My parents did not respond publicly. They never defended themselves. They never denied it either. Silence had always been their preferred language when control slipped through their fingers. Weeks passed. Life settled again. just quieter this time, more grounded. I spent mornings in the garden, tending the plants Evelyn loved. Lavender for calm, rosemary for remembrance, marigolds for resilience. I added one new thing that spring, just like I promised her. A white rose bush. I named it Rebirth. Sometimes I caught myself smiling at nothing, the way you do when grief softens into gratitude. I had lost her, but I had gained something too. Clarity, proof, roots. One afternoon, I received a message from Monique. It was short, defensive. She said I had ruined the family. Said I enjoyed embarrassing them. Said I always wanted attention. I didn't reply. Because, for the first time in my life, I understood something clearly. Accountability feels like cruelty to people who have never been held to it. I didn't need her to understand. I didn't need closure from her. Closure isn't something other people give you. It's something you stop asking for. I blocked her number and went back outside. The rosebush was catching the light just right. New leaves, strong stems. No apology for taking up space. That felt right. With Monique blocked and my parents silent, the noise finally stopped. Not all at once, but enough for me to hear myself think. I realized how much of my life had been shaped by bracing for impact, by waiting for the next accusation, the next demand, the next attempt to rewrite what had already happened. Without that wait, something strange occurred. I rested. Not collapse into bed exhaustion, but real rest. The kind that lets your shoulders drop without you noticing. The kind that doesn't require vigilance. My work continued to grow, but I stopped measuring success the way I used to. It was no longer about proving anything to anyone. I chose clients more carefully. I took weekends off. I said no without explanation. I built boundaries the way some people build fences, not to keep the world out, but to define what was mine. Every so often, someone from the extended family would reach out. Some apologized genuinely. Some wanted reassurance that they were not like my parents. I accepted what felt sincere and let the rest pass by. Healing, I learned, is selective. It has to be. One afternoon, while cleaning out my office, I found the framed note again. The one my mother had left taped to a trash bag years ago. You are on your own now. Learn something from this. I studied it for a long time. They had meant it as punishment, as abandonment, as a warning. But they were wrong about one thing. I had learned. I learned how to survive without approval. How to build safety where there was none. How to love without conditions, because I had lived without it. I learned that family is not who shares your blood, but who shares your truth without trying to change it. That realization didn't come with fireworks. It came quietly, like most real things do. Later that week, I met with my lawyer again. We finalized paperwork connected to Evelyn's estate. Everything was clean. Legal, undeniable. There would be no more threats. No leverage left for anyone to try. When I left the office, I didn't feel victorious. I felt finished. Finished carrying their version of me. Finished explaining myself. Finished hoping they would one day wake up and see what they lost. Some stories don't end with reconciliation. Some end with release. I used to think release would feel dramatic, like a final confrontation or a tearful goodbye. Instead, it felt ordinary, peaceful even, like waking up one morning and realizing the ache you lived with for years was finally gone. There were moments when memories still surfaced unexpectedly. A song in a grocery store, the smell of cheap coffee, a laugh that sounded too familiar. But they no longer carried the same power. They were echoes, not commands. I began volunteering more intentionally, mentoring young women who reminded me of my younger self. Girls who had learned early how to be small to survive. I didn't tell them my whole story. I didn't need to. I just listened. Sometimes, being believed is the most radical form of care. The house changed too. Not physically, but in spirit. Friends gathered there. Laughter stayed late into the evening. The garden grew fuller each season. The white rose bush stretched wider, stubborn and alive. I talked to Evelyn while I worked the soil, telling her about small victories, about days that felt light. Every spring, I planted something new. A ritual that anchored me. A reminder that starting over doesn't mean starting empty. It means starting honest. I never heard from my parents again, not directly. I learned through others that they had downsized, moved quietly, avoided questions. They preferred stories that required no reflection. I let them keep that. What surprised me most was how little I missed them. Not because I was heartless, but because I had already grieved the idea of who they were supposed to be. You can't miss what never truly existed. One evening, as the sun dipped low and the house settled into its familiar quiet, I realized something that would have once terrified me. I was happy, not euphoric, not perfect, just steady, rooted, at home in myself in a way I never thought possible. And for the first time, that felt like enough. Happiness didn't erase the past, but it softened its edges. I stopped flinching at good things, stopped waiting for them to be taken away. When problems came, and they still did, I met them head-on instead of assuming they were punishment. One afternoon, I found myself rereading old journal entries I had written in my late teens, pages filled with fear, self-doubt, and questions that never got answered back then. I didn't recognize that girl anymore, and yet I felt immense tenderness toward her. She survived something she never should have had to. That realization changed how I spoke to myself. I stopped using the language my parents taught me. I stopped calling myself dramatic for feeling pain or ungrateful for wanting more. I replaced those words with kinder ones, honest ones. I also stopped hiding my success, not out of spite, but because shrinking had never protected me anyway. I allowed myself to celebrate milestones, to accept praise without deflecting it, to take up space without apology. Every now and then, someone would ask if I planned to reconcile. If I thought time might heal everything, I would smile politely and say some things heal and some things teach. Not every wound is meant to be reopened just to prove you're forgiving. The house became a place of intention. No yelling, no walking on eggshells, no conditional love. If someone crossed a boundary, they were corrected once. If they crossed it again, they were gone. Simple, clean. At night, when the world quieted down, I sometimes stood at the window and looked out at the garden. The rose bush had grown stronger than I expected. Its roots deep, its blooms steady. It didn't need permission to exist. Neither did I. There is a strange moment that comes after healing, one nobody warns you about. It's when you realize your story no longer hurts to tell. Not because it didn't matter, but because it no longer owns you. The memories are still there, intact and true, but they sit quietly now, like old photographs instead of open wounds. I stopped introducing myself through what I survived. I was no longer the girl who was thrown out, or the spare, or the problem child. I was a business owner, a mentor, a homeowner, a woman who had built a life with intention and care. Those things weren't reactions anymore. They were choices. Sometimes I wondered if my parents ever reflected on what happened. If they ever sat in the quiet and felt the weight of their decisions. But wondering didn't lead anywhere useful. Accountability doesn't require my participation. It arrives on its own schedule, or not at all. What mattered was what I chose next. I expanded my business slowly, refusing to sacrifice my peace for growth. I created scholarships for local students who had unstable home lives. I invested in community projects that gave people second chances without demanding explanations. I knew too well how rarely anyone asks the right questions. One evening, while hosting a small dinner with friends, I caught myself laughing freely, unguarded. It startled me. I realized I wasn't performing happiness anymore. I was living it. Later that night, after everyone had gone home, I walked through the house, turning off lights. Each room felt intentional, earned, safe. I paused in my office, looking at the framed note on the wall and the award beside it. Two artifacts from different lives, coexisting without conflict. That was growth. Not erasing the past, but integrating it without letting it dictate the future. People often ask what it feels like to win after losing everything. I don't think of it as winning. Winning implies a competition, and I stopped competing with ghosts a long time ago. What I feel is ownership of my time, my space, my story. The label they gave me never fit. Spare, extra, disposable. It was a story they needed so they wouldn't have to question themselves. But labels don't survive contact with truth. They crack, they peel, they fall away. I used to imagine confronting my parents one last time, saying everything I never got to say. But now I understand that the most powerful response was the life I built without their permission. Silence, when chosen, can be louder than any argument. My grandmother understood that. Evelyn knew legacy isn't about what you hoard, but what you protect. She protected the truth. She protected me. And in doing so, she changed the ending of a story that could have destroyed me. Sometimes, late in the evening, I sit on the porch she loved and listen to the quiet. No shouting, no accusations, just the sound of wind moving through leaves. Peace doesn't announce itself. It settles in slowly, until one day you realize you're no longer bracing for pain. I am not angry anymore. I am not waiting for apologies. I am not hoping to be chosen. I already chose myself. I used to believe the cruelest part of being called a spare was the rejection itself. But that wasn't it. The cruelest part was how long I believed it. How deeply I let someone else's version of me sink into my bones. It took years to unlearn that lie. Today, when I walk through the garden, I see proof of what survives when you stop trying to earn love from people who profit from withholding it. The white rose bush stands taller now, its roots firm, its blooms open without apology. It doesn't ask permission to exist. It just does. And so do I. If you listened all the way to the end, thank you. It truly means more to me than you know. Before we wrap up, go ahead and like this video and share it if the story blessed you. I was never the spare. I was the seed. The one buried, overlooked, pressed into the dark until something strong enough grew anyway. My family tried to discard me. Instead, they taught me how to stand alone, how to choose truth, how to build a life that didn't require their approval. The story doesn't end with reconciliation. It ends with roots, with peace, with dignity that no one can take away. And that, finally, is enough. For another story that fits your mood, click the video on the left. To hear the latest one, choose the video on the right.
I'm Ava Mitchell, and this is the story of how I learned that sometimes family can be your worst enemy, especially in business. For 10 years, I poured my heart and soul into our small family-run tech company, transforming it from a struggling startup into a $50 million enterprise. But success has a way of exposing the ugliest sides of people, even the ones who are supposed to stand by you. I remember when it all began. Back when our family business was just a tiny computer repair shop in a strip mall, barely making enough to get by. My dad had started it 20 years ago, and despite its struggles, it was his pride and joy. My sister, Lauren, was always the golden child. Straight A's, elite business school, Dad's favorite. Meanwhile, I was the quiet one, the one who stayed behind to help him while pursuing a computer science degree at a local college. "Ava, you're wasting your potential here," Lauren would say during her visits home from school. "You should aim higher." But I saw something in that little shop that no one else did: potential. While Lauren was off studying theoretical business models, I was learning how the real world worked. I was coding, fixing systems, spotting gaps in the market that no one else was paying attention to. During my final year of college, I developed our first proprietary software, a simple but effective inventory management tool for small businesses. It wasn't groundbreaking, but it was affordable, user-friendly, and met a real need. At first, Dad was skeptical. But when local businesses started buying licenses, his tune changed. "Maybe you're onto something here, kiddo," he said, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of pride in his eyes. That moment meant everything to me. If only I had known how temporary it would be. Under my leadership, the business began to grow. I worked 14-hour days, 7 days a week, pouring everything I had into our success. While Lauren was climbing the corporate ladder at a top consulting firm in New York, I was building something real. Our tiny repair shop evolved into a full-fledged software development company, expanding from local clients to national corporations. Mom watched me with quiet concern. "Don't work yourself into the ground, Ava," she'd say, bringing me dinner at the office. "You need a life outside of this." But I couldn't stop. Maybe part of me was still chasing validation. Maybe I just wanted to prove that I could make something of my own. 5 years into our transformation, we hit our first million in annual revenue. That's when Lauren suddenly took an interest in the family business again. She quit her high-profile job and moved back home. At a family dinner, she made her grand announcement. "I think it's time I took my rightful place in the company," she said, flashing her trademark confidence. With my business expertise, we could really take things to the next level. Dad practically lit up. "That's wonderful, sweetheart. We could use your professional touch around here." I sat there, my fork suspended midair, trying to process what was happening. The company I had built from nothing was now being handed to Lauren like some kind of inheritance. I swallowed my objections and played along. Lauren was appointed as co-CEO, despite having zero experience in our industry. Dad insisted it was good for our company's image to have someone with her credentials at the helm. So while I continued handling product development and operations, she took over marketing and investor relations. For the next 5 years, our business flourished, but so did the tension. I kept developing new software, building relationships, and improving our services. Meanwhile, Lauren crafted an image for herself as the face of the company. She gave interviews about being a woman in tech, accepted awards for entrepreneurship, and took credit for innovations she had nothing to do with. Our revenues skyrocketed to $50 million, but so did the power struggle. Lauren began excluding me from key meetings, making decisions without consulting me. Slowly, methodically, pushing me to the sidelines of my own creation. Then came Dad's 60th birthday party, the night that changed everything. The party, of course, was Lauren's idea. She had rented out the grand ballroom at the city's most expensive hotel and invited all our business associates. It wasn't really a birthday party, it was a networking event disguised as one. But that was Lauren's style. Everything had to serve a purpose. I arrived early to help with preparations, wearing a simple black dress. The moment Lauren spotted me, she gave me that disapproving look I had grown used to over the years. "Couldn't you have made more of an effort?" she hissed. "These are important people, Ava." I ignored her and focused on greeting guests. The room quickly filled with business executives, investors, and family friends. Lauren worked the room like a politician, shaking hands and flashing her perfectly rehearsed smile. I, as usual, stayed in the background, making sure everything ran smoothly. Dinner was served, and just as I was starting to relax, Lauren clinked her glass for attention. I expected a typical speech, a tribute to Dad, maybe some nostalgic childhood memories. Instead, she dropped a bomb that shattered everything. As we celebrate Dad's 60th birthday, she began, her voice confident and commanding, I think it's time to announce some changes at Mitchell Tech. My stomach twisted. Changes? The board has agreed that the company needs unified leadership to move forward, she continued, her words slicing through the room like a blade. Board meetings? What board meetings? For too long, we've been held back by outdated thinking and resistance to change, Lauren went on, her eyes locking onto mine. That's why, effective immediately, I will be taking over as sole CEO. It's time for certain elements that no longer serve our growth to step aside. A murmur rippled through the crowd. I sat there, frozen, as Lauren carried out her corporate execution in front of our entire network. Some people, she added, her voice dripping with false sympathy, are better suited for technical roles rather than leadership.
She was talking about me.
Humiliating me. My sister, Ava, has done an adequate job maintaining our legacy systems, but in today's fast-moving industry, we need vision. We need excellence. And frankly, Ava, you're just not cut out for this level of business. I turned to Dad. Say something. Stand up for me. But he just nodded along, a proud smile on his face. Mom, on the other hand, kept her eyes down, her hands trembling slightly on the table. Lauren wasn't done. The truth is, she said, her voice rising for dramatic effect, Ava, you are worthless in today's business world. Your outdated ideas and lack of formal business education have become the liability. It's time for you to step aside gracefully. The silence in the room was suffocating. Hundreds of eyes were on me, waiting for my response. I could feel the pity, the judgment, the unspoken agreement with Lauren's words. Everything I had built, every late night, every sacrifice, it was all being stripped away in front of everyone. Slowly, I stood. My chair scraped against the floor, the sound slicing through the hush like a gunshot. Everyone expected a scene. Maybe tears. A screaming match. Instead, I simply picked up my purse, walked over to Dad's table, and placed a small, wrapped package in front of him. Happy birthday, Dad, I said quietly. Then I turned and walked out, head held high, leaving behind the whispers, the stares, and the sister who thought she had won. That night, I sat in my home office, surrounded by awards and patents that bore my name. Lauren believed she had taken everything from me, but she had forgotten one crucial detail, something that would turn her moment of triumph into the biggest mistake of her life. As I powered up my laptop and began typing, a small smile played on my lips. Tomorrow would be interesting. After all, there's more than one way to run a successful business. And in 10 years, I had learned far more than Lauren had in all her fancy business classes. The next morning, the sun rose bright and clear. And with it, everything was about to change. I arrived at the office early, before anyone else, and waited. At precisely 9 a.m., Lauren strode through the front doors with Dad beside her, both wearing triumphant smiles, smiles that were about to be wiped off their faces. Ava? Lauren's voice held a mix of surprise and annoyance. What are you doing here? I thought after last night, you'd have the dignity to stay home. I smiled, remembering the email I had sent at 3 a.m. to every major client, partner, and employee of Mitchell Tech. Just wrapping up some loose ends, sister dear. But since you're here, we should probably talk about the company's future. There's nothing to discuss, Dad interjected, his voice firm. Lauren's in charge now. The board has already approved it. Ah, yes, the board, I said, pulling out my tablet. Let's talk about that. I tapped the screen, and the conference room's main monitor lit up with a document. You see, while Lauren was busy planning parties and giving interviews, I was actually building this company. And there are a few things you both seem to have forgotten. I pulled up another document, zooming in for emphasis. First, let me remind you that I own 51% of Mitchell Tech shares. When we incorporated 10 years ago, Dad gave Lauren and me equal shares, 25% each, while keeping 50% for himself. But 3 years ago, when we needed capital for expansion, Dad sold me 6% of his shares. Remember that day, Dad? You were too busy attending Lauren's award ceremony to handle the negotiations yourself, so you signed the papers without reading them carefully. The color drained from both their faces. Lauren's perfectly manicured hands gripped the conference table. "That's impossible," she whispered. "Dad would never." "But he did," I interrupted, pulling up another document. "And that's not all." I clicked again, and another screen filled with legal filings. The core software that generates 80% of our revenue? It's not owned by Mitchell Tech. It's owned by my separate company, Innovate Solutions, LLC. Mitchell Tech only has a licensing agreement, which expires in— I checked my watch. About 10 minutes ago. Dad collapsed into a chair, realization dawning on his face. "The renewal papers," he murmured. "The ones you asked me to sign last week, the ones I didn't read because you were too busy helping Lauren plan the party?" I finished for him. "Yes, those papers. I decided not to submit them." Lauren's face twisted in rage. "You underhanded little." "Careful, sister." I cut her off smoothly. "You might want to hear the rest before you finish that sentence." I clicked again, and a flood of emails appeared on the screen. "While you were busy announcing my graceful exit last night, I was sending emails to our clients. You see, most of our major clients have personal loyalty clauses in their contracts. They signed with Mitchell Tech because of me, my expertise, my track record. Last night, I informed them of the leadership changes and my departure. I zoomed in, showing dozens of responses from our biggest accounts. Would you like to know how many have already triggered their contract termination clauses?" I tilted my head. "Or how many of our top developers, who, by the way, are actually employed by Innovate Solutions, not Mitchell Tech, have already accepted positions at my new venture?" Silence. Through the glass walls, we could see employees gathering, whispers spreading as they checked their emails. Lauren frantically pulled out her phone, her perfect composure cracking as she scrolled. "You can't do this," she stammered. "You mean I can't take back what's mine?" I said calmly. "You thought you could just take over because you have an MBA and Dad's approval? You thought you could humiliate me in front of everyone and get away with it?" I stood, smoothing my dress. "So here are your options." I let the weight of my words settle before continuing. Option 1, I walk away. With my shares, my software, my clients, and my employees. Mitchell Tech becomes an empty shell, and you can explain to all those important people you invited last night why the company's value just dropped to zero overnight. Dad's face aged 10 years in the last 10 minutes. "And option 2, he asked weakly. "Option 2, you both resign." I took a deep breath and met their stunned expressions with a calm, unwavering gaze. "I take full control of Mitchell Tech," I continued. "You both keep your shares as silent partners, receiving dividends but having no say in operations. Lauren gets a nice severance package and glowing references for her next job, somewhere far away from here." Lauren's face turned an interesting shade of red. "You planned this all along, didn't you? You were just waiting for the right moment to stab us in the back." I let out a short laugh, devoid of humor.
"No, Lauren."
"I spent 10 years trying to be a good daughter, a good sister. And the entire time, you both took me for granted. I built this company from nothing while you collected accolades for my work. I only planned this," I checked my watch again, "about 12 hours ago. After you called me worthless in front of everyone we know." My phone buzzed. Another client termination notice. "Time's running out." What's it going to be? The next hour was a blur of paperwork and lawyers. By noon, I sat alone in what was now my office, looking out over the city. The company I had built was now truly mine. But the victory felt hollow. Family relationships lay in ruins around me, trust shattered like dropped crystal. That evening, Mom came to see me. Her eyes were red from crying. "Did it have to end this way?" she asked softly. I met her gaze, my voice gentle but firm. "They gave me no choice. They would have taken everything I built and discarded me without a second thought." She nodded slowly, understanding but sad. "What happens now?" I turned my laptop toward her. showing her the plans I had already drawn up. Expansions, new product lines, innovations I had been holding back. Nows. I exhaled, feeling lighter than I had in years. Now I build something even bigger. But this time, I do it without carrying people who see me as worthless. 1 year later, under my sole leadership, Mitchell Tech tripled in value. Lauren found a job with a startup in Silicon Valley, humbled but hopefully wiser. Dad retired, finally understanding that his golden child had nearly destroyed his legacy. We see each other at holidays, maintaining a polite distance, masking wounds that may never fully heal. Sometimes, late at night, I look at old family photos and feel a twinge of sadness for what we lost. But then, I remember that night at the birthday party. The look of disdain on Lauren's face. The way Dad nodded along with her cruel words. And I remind myself, in business and in family, respect is earned, not given. They learned that lesson too late. My story spread through business circles, a cautionary tale about underestimating the wrong person. At industry events, I often catch whispers. That's Ava Mitchell, the one who... They never finish the sentence. They don't have to. My success speaks for itself. Last week, I received an invitation to speak at Lauren's business school's graduation ceremony. The topic? Hidden strengths, the power of underestimated leaders. I accepted the invitation with a small smile, already planning my speech. After all, I have quite a story to tell. The company continues to thrive under my leadership. But more importantly, I found peace with my decisions. Sometimes, the strongest message you can send is simply proving people wrong. And sometimes, the best revenge isn't about destroying others. It's about rising so high that they can't help but see their own mistakes. As I sit here in my office, overlooking the city, I remember something my mother once told me. Success is the best revenge. But wisdom is knowing when to stop seeking revenge and start seeking growth. She was right. I've moved past revenge. These days, I focus on building something meaningful, something that will outlast the petty jealousies and family drama. I still keep that wrapped birthday present I never gave Dad. A photo album of the company's journey, from that tiny repair shop to what it is today. Maybe someday, when the wounds have healed enough, I'll finally give it to him. Until then, it sits on my shelf, a quiet reminder that our greatest strengths often come from the very things others underestimate about us. My in-laws left me with my bedridden, mute sister-in-law, Callista, and took off to Hawaii for a vacation. Just before leaving, my husband Bowden said, "Taking care of her is your responsibility. Don't slack off." As soon as Bowden and his family left, Callista surprised me by sitting up and saying, "All right, let's get going too." My name is Avalini, and I'm 27 years old. When I was younger, I had big dreams of becoming a pop star, but reality soon hit, and by the time I was in my late 20s, I had let go of that ambition. I met Bowden through a mutual friend and started dating him because, well, my mom kept asking me when she was going to have a grandchild. Bowden and I hit it off, especially when I learned that he too had dreamed of being in the entertainment industry when he was younger. Now, Bowden works for a prestigious trading company headquartered in Manhattan. As for me, I worked at a bank after college, but I quit when we got married. One day, we went to visit Bowden's parents. He has a younger sister, Callista, who suffered from encephalitis as a child. It started with what everyone thought was a regular fever, but when it didn't go away, the doctor diagnosed her with the brain inflammation caused by the flu. Sadly, by the time they realized it, it was too late. The fever had caused brain damage, leaving Callista unable to speak and bedridden. Since then, her mother has been her primary caretaker. Oddly enough, Callista and I got along well from the beginning. Although she couldn't speak, she used sign language to communicate, and after a while, I naturally learned it too. I remember one day, I playfully signed to her. "We're like best friends who've known each other forever, right?" She smiled and signed back, "Yes, let's stay close friends forever." I happily signed back, "Of course we will." But her mother, my mother-in-law, was the total opposite of Callista. She was always sarcastic and critical of me. We lived in a condo about 30 minutes away from Bowden's family home, but that didn't stop my mother-in-law from dropping by unexpectedly. Each time she visited, she would find something to criticize. Botany's shoes are a mess. You know, a man's shoes say a lot about his job. It's your duty to make sure they're clean, she'd scold. For some reason, she always called him Botany, like he was still a child. Make sure you fold the laundry neatly. If you don't, Botany will be in a bad mood. And remember, never go to bed before Botany, even if he says it's okay. Bowden, when we were dating and even in the early stages of our marriage, was kind and considerate. If I wasn't feeling well and asked to eat out, he would agree without hesitation. If I had my eye on a designer handbag, he'd surprise me with it a month later. But about a year into our marriage, Bowden started to change. Or maybe he just went back to how he truly was. He started coming home late, reeking of alcohol. He claimed work was keeping him busy, even on weekends, and stopped inviting me to visit his parents' house with him, which I found strange. One day, I confronted him. Bowden, you've been so distant lately. You barely talk to me anymore. It feels like you're not the same person. He glared at me for a second, then coldly replied, That's not true. You're overthinking things. I wasn't about to let it go that easily. I don't think I am. You've changed, Bowden. But he shut the conversation down with, Stop bringing this up. Then he walked away, leaving me standing there, confused and hurt. So when Bowden suddenly announced one day, I'm going to my parents' house this Sunday. What are you going to do? I was surprised. He had been going there alone for months. I quickly asked, Can I come too this time? He sighed and said, That's why I'm asking. Of course, I jumped at the chance to go. I'd love to. I've missed Callista. Bowden didn't seem too thrilled about that, and I noticed a faint grimace when I mentioned his sister. Yeah, you and Callista seem to get along really well, huh? He said. We do. It feels like we've been best friends forever, I replied, trying to lighten the mood. On Sunday, we made the drive to his family's home in Nebraska. We even stopped at a bakery to pick up some pastries for his mother. She was always hard to please, but pastries usually did the trick. When we arrived, Bowden's mom greeted us, her face scrunched up the moment she saw me. Clearly not happy I had come along. Mother-in-law, I brought some pastries for you, I said, handing them over. She grabbed the box, peeked inside, and with a dismissive tone said, Oh, these again? They're getting boring, but if you insist, I'll have them. Her face then lit up, like a child getting a new toy. Is father here? Bowden asked. His dad was still working despite being quite elderly. No, he's at a meeting. Why, did you need something? She replied. Not really, just had something to talk to him about, Bowden answered. I hadn't heard anything about this conversation Bowden wanted to have with his father, so I asked, Did you have something important to discuss? Bowden shot me a look and said, It's none of your business. What do you mean? We're married. Of course, it's my business. I argued. But before Bowden could respond, his mother cut in. Exactly. If Bowden doesn't want to share something with you, then stop prying. Knowing it was pointless to argue with her, I kept quiet. Just then, Callista appeared at the doorway, and seeing Bowden, she smiled. Oh, Bowden, you're here? Bowden surprised me one day by suggesting a family trip to Hawaii. How about you, sis? He asked Callista, his bedridden and mute sister. She shrugged and replied, I'll pass. I don't have a passport. I was caught off guard. Bowden was always so tied up with work, so it was strange to hear him planning a vacation. Bowden, is everything okay at your job? I asked, still puzzled by the sudden plan. Everything's fine. I wouldn't be suggesting this if work wasn't going well, he replied, a little annoyed. His mother, who always seemed displeased with me, glared and added her 2 cents. You shouldn't meddle in Bowden's decisions. You're being too nosy. Then Bowden dropped a bombshell. Actually, Avelini, the real reason I brought you here is because I want you to take care of Callista while we're on vacation. I was taken aback for a moment, but quickly realized that staying with Callista would be much better than being stuck in Hawaii with my mother-in-law. Okay, I'll take care of Callista. I agreed, though it stung a bit that Bowden hadn't even considered me for the trip. But you didn't need to drag me here just to tell me that. Well, Bowden said, I figured if I told you in front of my mother, you'd be less likely to resist. He knew I would probably be upset about not going to Hawaii, and his mother would back him up if I tried to argue. It was clear they had planned this together, and I felt a bit cornered. After the conversation ended, I made my way to Callista's room. She was lying on the bed, but beamed when she saw me. "It's been a while. How have you been?" she signed to me. "I'm good," I signed back. "Bowden asked me to come over today, though it's strange because for months now, he's been visiting without me." Callista's face grew serious. "My brother is always hiding something. He's never been the open type," she signed. She then mentioned how Bowden and the rest of the family were planning a trip to Hawaii. "I'm staying behind, though," she added, with a grin that suggested she was perfectly okay with it. We continued chatting, and I enjoyed our time together. I always wondered why Callista and her mother were so different, and now it started to make sense. A few hours later, Bowden came to collect me, and we headed home. As I left, Callista gave me a sly wink and hinted at something bigger, saying, "I'll tell you soon." Fast forward to the day of the Hawaii trip. Bowden and I went to his parents' house, but while the rest of the family was packing for their flight, I was getting ready to stay with Callista for the week. I brought my luggage to Callista's room, and she greeted me with excitement. "It's happening," she signed with a playful grin. When I came back to the living room, Bowden's family was preparing to leave. His voice rose above everyone else's as he reminded me, "Taking care of Callista is your responsibility. Don't slack off." Even my mother-in-law chimed in, "Be sure to get along well with Callista. It's better for you to stay here anyway." Then she added something that made me bite my tongue. "If anything happens to Callista, it'll be all your fault. We'll hold you accountable." I couldn't believe the audacity of a family leaving their disabled daughter behind for a vacation while blaming me for anything that could go wrong. But I said nothing and walked back to Callista's room, not wanting to deal with them any longer. The moment I stepped inside, Callista sprang up from her bed with more energy than I'd ever seen. "Come on, let's get going," she said, breaking the silence I had grown so used to. I froze, my mind racing. "What?" I managed to say, completely shocked. Callista chuckled. "I told you I can actually walk. And I can talk too." "Since when?" I asked, still in disbelief. "Since last year, I think," she replied casually. "Why have you been hiding it from everyone?" With a calm expression, Callista began to explain everything. "Actually, there's something you don't know. My father and mother are both remarried. I'm my dad's child from his first marriage, and my brother and sister are from my mom's side." Suddenly, so much made sense. Her mother's coldness, the way she was treated like a burden. It all clicked. "I had a feeling," I admitted. "Yeah," Callista continued. "Mom can't stand me, and I didn't want to deal with her, so I pretended I couldn't talk or walk. But Dad knows everything. He's always been on my side." As I processed what she was saying, Callista dropped another bombshell. "That's why I've decided we're going to Hawaii too." "What?" I asked, completely confused. "You mean today?" "Yup. We'll even be staying at the same resort as Bowden and his family." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Wait, I'd love to go with you, Callista, but do you even have a passport?" "Of course. I secretly got my passport last month. And don't worry about money. Dad is paying for everything. Our flights, the resort, even your ticket." I was floored. "I see. I guess we're really going to Hawaii then." And that's how we ended up where we are now. Callista and I took a taxi to the airport, and when we arrived, her father was waiting to see us off. "Avelini, I know this must be a shock, but I hope you enjoy the trip," he said kindly. "Thank you," I replied, still a bit overwhelmed by everything. "I feel bad that you're covering all the costs." "Don't worry about it," he reassured me. "As long as you two have a good time, I'm happy." With that, we boarded our plane, on a different airline from Bowden's family, of course, and arrived in Hawaii early the next morning. We checked into the resort hotel, where Callista and I shared a room, both of us bubbling with excitement for the adventure ahead. I casually mentioned to Callista, "Your father seems to have traveled a lot." "Yeah, he's been on many international business trips, even to Hawaii a few times," she responded. "So, what's the plan?" I asked, curious about what she had in mind. Callista smirked. "I'm guessing my mom and everyone will be dining at the restaurant tonight. I think it's time for a little surprise. I chuckled, excited at the thought. That sounds like fun. We should get some rest first, though. We've both got some jet lag to shake off. That's a good idea, Callista agreed. I couldn't sleep a wink on the plane. We showered and climbed into bed, quickly drifting off into a much-needed sleep. By the time we woke up, it was late afternoon, close to 4 o'clock. Callista was already up, putting on makeup, when I stirred awake. Sorry, I slept too long. I apologized. No worries, I just woke up too, Callista reassured me. We both needed it. Now we're fully charged and ready for battle. Around 7 o'clock, I told Callista, I'll head down to the restaurant to check things out. I snuck down to the restaurant, staying hidden in the shadows near the entrance as I scanned the room for Bowden and his family. There they were, sitting joyfully at a table in the far corner. I moved a little closer to get a better view and noticed something shocking. A young woman was with them, someone I didn't recognize. This woman wasn't there when they left Bowden's parents' house, and I nearly gasped aloud in disbelief. As I strained to hear their conversation, I could make out parts of what Bowden and my mother-in-law were saying. I'm glad it's not that woman tonight, my mother-in-law muttered. I really drew the short straw with her. She's tainted our family. Bowden's voice followed, dripping with disdain. I want to divorce her and start over. I'll find a reason, and I'll squeeze every penny I can out of her. My mother-in-law added, even if you don't have a solid reason, we can fabricate one. She's such a bad match. I wish I could just throw her in the trash. They continued talking, and it was clear they were planning to rid themselves of me, all while celebrating with this mysterious woman. I fought the urge to confront them right then and there, and instead retreated back to our room, my heart racing with anger. When I got back, Callista looked up at me. That took a while. What happened? She asked, noticing my pale face. I saw something shocking, I whispered, still processing what I had heard. Bowden brought a woman I've never seen before, and they were talking about divorcing me. Callista gasped. What? That's awful. I nodded, though a strange calm settled over me. Honestly, I feel relieved. Now that I've seen him with someone else, I'm ready to move on. I can finally divorce him. Callista grinned. That's a good thing. So, shall we go make our entrance? With a mischievous smile, we headed to the restaurant. We asked to be seated near Bowden's table, and the hostess found us a spot close enough to hear everything. They were still deeply engrossed in their conversation, unaware of our presence. The insults about me continued, and I couldn't help but laugh bitterly at how endlessly they could badmouth me. Callista caught my eye and gave me a nod, our signal to begin the counterattack. I stood up and walked directly to their table, my voice loud and clear. Are you all having a good time? The shock on Bowden's face was priceless. His mouth dropped open, and my mother-in-law's eyes widened in disbelief. For a moment, they were completely frozen. Finally, my mother-in-law broke the silence. What are you doing here? And how is Callista here, without a wheelchair? Callista stood up with a confident smile. I don't need a wheelchair anymore. The room seemed to stand still as they processed her words. Bowden and his mother stared at Callista in stunned silence. Thanks to you, Callista continued with a sharp smile, I've regained my ability to walk and talk. I must have caused you so much trouble for all these years, but I'm fine now. When did you start talking again? My mother-in-law stammered, her face turning pale. Maybe about a year ago, Callista answered casually. Why didn't you tell us? Bowden asked, still in shock. Because it was easier for me if you all thought I was still mute, Callista said bluntly. And besides, I heard what you were saying about Avellini. My mother-in-law's face turned as white as a sheet. What do you mean? She asked, trying to backtrack. We weren't saying anything bad about you, Avellini, Bowden tried to lie. Oh, really? I said, pulling out my phone. Because I recorded everything. Would you like to hear it? Bowden's face twisted in anger. Avellini, you've caused me nothing but trouble. Now you're making these ridiculous accusations. I met his anger with cold resolve. Once we get back, I'll be contacting my lawyer to start the divorce process. And you can't deny what you've done. You're on vacation with another woman, plotting to divorce me. Plus, you called marrying me a bad lottery ticket, so I expect you to compensate me for that insult. My mother-in-law, realizing they had been caught, tried to change her tune. Avellini, dear, I've always liked you. Let's try to work this out with Bowden. This woman means nothing to him. I wasn't having it. I'm sorry, but I can't live with a man who sees me as a bad lottery ticket. Enjoy your time with this woman. And don't be surprised if I seek compensation from her too. The other woman, now pale and trembling, looked terrified. Bowden, desperate, fell to his knees. Avellini, please don't make a big deal out of this. My company has strict policies. I shook my head, unimpressed by his plea. You don't sound sorry at all. I stood firm and replied to Bowden, who was visibly shaken, but he wasn't giving up just yet. Avellini, I beg you, please forgive me. If my company finds out, I'll lose my job, he pleaded, desperation lacing his voice. Though his panic was clear, I remained unmoved. You should have thought about that before, I said coldly. You are married, yet here you are in Hawaii with another woman. I will never forgive you. Upon hearing my harsh words, my mother-in-law collapsed to her knees beside Bowden, her tears flowing freely. Please, Avellini, forgive my son, she begged, her voice trembling with emotion. By now, the entire restaurant was watching us. The scene we were making was drawing attention, and the manager began to approach our table. I stood up, not wanting to continue the spectacle. Callista and I will head back to our room now. You all enjoy the rest of your Hawaiian vacation, I said coolly. I suppose things will get a little more complicated when you return home. Bowden, now sobbing uncontrollably, shouted, Please forgive me. I can't afford to pay any compensation. His outburst caused the restaurant manager to frown. The manager said something to a nearby staff member and then politely but firmly told Bowden that he was disturbing the other guests and needed to leave. Bowden, still in shock, didn't seem to understand the message, and soon 2 large security guards appeared. Without much effort, they hauled Bowden out of the restaurant. Though Bowden struggled and cried, he was no match for their strength. My mother-in-law and the other woman sat frozen, their expressions a mix of disbelief and embarrassment. Callista and I exchanged surprised glances at how things had escalated, but I couldn't help but feel that Bowden had gotten exactly what he deserved. A week later, Callista and I returned home. I heard that Bowden had been released shortly after being thrown out of the restaurant, but he had stayed in a state of shock for the rest of the trip, keeping to himself. It didn't bother me in the least. The very next day after getting back, I visited a law firm where an old friend from college worked. Unfortunately, my friend wasn't there, but I was assigned a female lawyer who was easy to talk to. I explained everything that had happened, the infidelity, the lies, and the hurtful comments. After listening carefully, she assured me that divorce was not only possible, but that I could also claim alimony from Bowden. She also said she would investigate the woman who had been with Bowden in Hawaii to see if I could claim compensation from her as well. A month later, the lawyer contacted me with the news. It was proven that Bowden had been seeing the other woman for about 6 months. This made it possible for me to seek alimony from her too. Without hesitation, I asked my lawyer, Please, get as much alimony as you can from both Bowden and that woman. She smiled and gave me a reassuring nod. 2 months later, the divorce was finalized, and soon after, a hefty sum of alimony from both Bowden and his mistress was deposited into my account. As I looked at the amount, I couldn't help but mutter, Well, that's karma for calling me a blank lottery ticket. 3 months later, out of the blue, Bowden and my mother-in-law appeared at my door. To my surprise, they both looked gaunt, having lost a significant amount of weight. Their once confident, arrogant faces were now worn and haggard. I opened the door just enough to ask, What do you want? I have no desire to see either of you. Bowden's voice was weak as he replied, I'm sorry, Avellini. Could you lend me some money? I lost my job and the woman she left me. I don't even have enough for food. My mother-in-law, looking equally defeated, chimed in softly, I've divorced my husband too. I'm broke. Please, Avellini, we're begging you. She was in tears, but it didn't stir any sympathy in me. I crossed my arms and responded without a hint of emotion. Too bad. I have absolutely no obligation to help either of you. Even if I did, I wouldn't lift a finger. Now leave. They stood there for a moment, speechless, before shuffling away. After they left, I grabbed a large handful of salt and sprinkled it across the doorway to cleanse my home of their bad energy. It felt like a final step in closing the door to that part of my life for good.